In this video, we're going to continue the series on belief in today's world and look at why some people believe in a transcendent reality, or as we also call that transcendent reality, God. And the first reason I'd like to inspect is just believing because everybody else does. I don't find that a very good reason to believe, and I'll explain that later. Another reason that I don't find a very good reason to believe in God or transcendent reality is that it explains the origin of life and the universe. And I'll get into why later. And these are all reasons that I don't find good reasons, good support for the belief in a transcendent reality or God. Another reason some people believe in a transcendent reality or God is that it meets their psychological need for certainty. Right? It somehow meets some needs that they have, makes them feel better about things, and so they believe it. Again, I don't think this is a good reason, and I'll show why. Just a straight up bad reason to believe in God would be what Loeffling calls religiosity, or I refer to as bad religion. And that's the justification of self-centered desires that gets tied up with an imprudent image of God. This is not a good reason to believe in God from my perspective. And then I do find what I see as a good reason to believe in God. That is the reason that a lot of people believe in God, and that is their personal experience of the transcendent God. So let's look at the first reason people might believe in a transcendent reality, or what we're talking about when we talk about God. Now, first of all, our ideas about and even our experience of the transcendent, of God, usually do come to us through our communities. Okay, so when I say it's a bad idea to believe just because everybody else believes, that just because is a very important point, right? It's often wise to believe something that everybody else believes, often, but not just because they believe it, right? So again, it's not wise to believe in something just because everybody else does without any correlation from your own experience. So we'll look at this later in the course. We'll look at Joseph Ratzinger's writings about the way that faith works in everyday life. And we'll see that, yes, we do have faith in what everyone else believes. But if that doesn't correlate with our own personal experience, then that's not going to be much of a basis for believing something, right? And that's what's wrong with believing just because everybody else believes, right? So if everybody else believes something and then I find that true too in my own personal experience, well, then that would be a good reason to believe, right? As long as it has that element of my personal experience corresponding and confirming, what everybody else is believing. But without it, it's just a form of blind faith. You're believing it with no reason to believe it. And it doesn't make use of reason, which we believe is an essential part of the human condition. Some people believe in God because they say, well, look at the universe, look at all these complex life forms. This stuff couldn't just happen by itself. There must have been someone who created it. There must have been a creator, or else we couldn't have this complex world. This is not a very good reason to believe in a transcendent reality or God, because the universe could be eternal. There are actually Eastern traditions, religious traditions, that believe that the universe is eternal. It doesn't need to be created because it's always been here, right? And the other one that's more relevant to our popular Western culture today is that scientific theories don't need God to explain the origins of the universe. So if the only reason you believe in God is because you don't see how we could have this complex universe with these complex life forms, well, that's not a very good reason to believe in God either. The third one is a psychological need for certainty. Some people feel the need to have something they can know for certain without any doubt. Actually, probably most people really like to be certain about something and want to know something for sure. And you see sometimes if you say something that causes them to question that, they will get very upset because it's like you're ripping their whole reality out from under them. And so some people embrace religious teachings about God, right? Some people will take religion and make it this kind of system of certainty, something they can know for certain without any doubt. Uh, this is not a good um, reason to believe in the transcendent reality or God, because the transcendent reality or God is by essence mysterious. It transcends ordinary, everyday human perception and knowledge. Right? It's not a very good thing to say, "Oh, I can know this for certain," as if it's something you can prove. And an example of okay, so sorry, this part of the slide, I'm just saying what I just said. It's not a good reason to believe because it's beyond sense perception. Right? You can't prove the existence of God. You can't disprove it either. So it's not a very good place to, or not a very good thing to use as a outlet for your psychological need for certainty. Actually, as you'll see throughout this course, you should probably get over this, as prudently as possible. We really cannot be certain, not only about God, but about many aspects of our existence. So, an example of some of a group of people that use um, that believe in the transcendent or attach a psychological need for certainty on regarding or related to their belief in the transcendent would be groups of people who are called fundamentalists or make a fundamentalist interpretation of Scripture. Now, there might be other reasons that people do this, but uh, a lot, it seems, of the groups who want to assert that the Bible is the simple word for word and absolute truth about everything. So it's true and correct in every way, that it can tell you about the scientific origins of the world. It can tell you about an exact history of the world. Everything in there is just perfect and certain, right? It doesn't need interpretation. There's no symbolism. It's just a simple, plainly asserted word for word, in no uncertain terms, truth. That's probably due to a psychological need, right? And I've heard people say that, well, I've heard some fundamentalist Christians say, well, I believe that everything in the Bible is a word for word, absolute truth in all ways, including science and history, because if I started to doubt that, then maybe I'd start to doubt something else. And then maybe I just doubt everything, right? But doubt is not the antithesis of faith. Doubt is part of faith, because faith is belief in something we can't know for certain. There has to be doubt on some level, or else it wouldn't be belief in the transcendent, right? Which is unable to be proven definitively. So, this need for certainty, not a good reason, in my opinion, to believe in the transcendent. And here I was also pointing out how this is a kind of blind faith, the fundamentalist interpretation of Scripture, because it will assert that the Bible is correct and without error in all aspects, including science and history, even when parts of the Bible contradict each other, right? And even when interpreting it in this way contradicts plain and obvious scientific evidence. Okay, another, I'll just say straight up bad reason for believing in God would be the justification of one's own self centered desires. Lofink, who we're going to read this semester, calls this religiosity. I call it bad religion. But what you have is sometimes people believe in God because it supports, or better yet, what some religion a particular religion or group within a religion teaches about God because it supports their own self-centered desires, right? It's not really about God or the transcendent at all. It's really about them, right? So what am I talking about here? Well, the desire to be a special person. Sometimes people feel if they join this religious group, then they'll have a special relationship with God and they become a special person. Or the desire to control and oppress other people. Sometimes people on power trips, some people who have a strong need for power and control can really get into religion and therefore, or sorry, religiosity, right? And therefore might believe in the transcendent reality that religion preaches. So an example of this kind of religiosity or bad religion, right, would be someone who feels like they're better than some other person because of their religious position or practice. And that could just be like, hey, I'm part of the right religion. And some people think, hey, I'm part of the right religion. I'm going to heaven. Right? People who aren't in this, they're not going there, or they're special, right? Or someone might say, oh, I'm a minister or a pastor or a monk or a priest or a religious sister or something, and that makes me better than other people, right? This actually used to be promoted as a way to get people into these roles, right? And unfortunately, we still see some of that today. This does not lead to a very nice life for the person who joins, um, who becomes, takes on a religious role within their community, like a priest or a monk or a sister or somebody. And in order to be a special person, it doesn't usually go too well for them because that's not really what those roles are about. Um, you see examples, especially throughout history, where religion is used to justify oppressive social class structures, like the caste system in India or slavery in Western Europe. People took religious bad interpretations, I'd say overall, in the case of Christianity, and used it to say that it's okay for some people to enslave other people. That's that. That would be a bad reason to believe in religion. But if you wanted to do that, if you wanted to think about yourself as someone who had the right to enslave other people in some bad religion, and I mean bad interpretation of religion, a bad application, right? Something that was really not about the transcendent reality, but about the justification of your own self-centered desire, said, hey, well, according to this religion or this interpretation of it, like according to interpretations of widespread interpretation of 16th century Christianity, right? Or at least, pockets within it, it was okay to enslave. It was okay for Europeans to enslave Africans. Well, that's just nonsense. That if you read the Bible, especially if you read it as a whole, it's not going to condone that kind of stuff. It's actually the opposite of the revelation, right? And then you see also extreme examples of this today in the case of religious terrorists. So you'll have Christians, people who say, oh, people who claim a Christian motivation, people who claim Islamic or Muslim motivation, other faiths too, Buddhist, Hindu, right? We see people using religion and therefore, the idea of God or a transcendent reality that's associated with that religion as justification for violence and mass murder of other people. Okay, I mean, this one is probably the easiest one just to dismiss. I don't think anybody thinks that this is a good idea, good reason to believe in the transcendent reality, right? But the more subtle aspects of this, just kind of somehow feeling like you're better than other people, that's probably more widespread than we might want to acknowledge, right? Again, why is this so bad? Well, the first reason is that it replaces the experience of the transcendent with one's own self-centered desires. It's not really about the transcendent at all. It's about me doing what I want and using the idea of the transcendent as an excuse to do it. Secondly, what results from this is the opposite of what we see the great faith traditions of the world sharing about the transcendent. Right? So you see in Christianity, God says, love one another. So this is the experience of the transcendent God that is shared in Christianity. Right? Turn the other cheek. Never, like, even if someone does harm to you, you do good back to them. Right? And we believe that the fullness of revelation was in the person of Jesus Christ, who was completely nonviolent in his response to evil in the world, allowing himself to be crucified as an enemy of the state. Right? And yet, right, people have used Christianity, right, a bad interpretation of Christianity. They've used it to justify violence, even though, the transcendent revelation, what is shared about God, is nonviolent, right? But people say, oh, it's okay to do this because we're defending the faith, right? Or they'll take a short phrase from the Bible and twist its meaning, right? Take it out of context with the rest of the Bible or something like that. Or in Islam, right? There is Islamic terrorists today. People who try to use Islam to justify the violent killing of innocent people. And they have complex arguments to do it, but it doesn't agree with what it says in the Quran, which says that you may use force to defend people who are being attacked, but that God hates the aggressor, right? That you should never use force in an aggressive way. It's only in certain conditions, right, in which people are being killed or run off of their land because of their faith. Then you could defend them, right? You could, if someone else was attacking, you could defend. Well, that's not what's going on with these terrorists, right? So again, what they're doing is the opposite of what is shared as the content of the revelation about the transcendent God. So we got to really watch out for this one. And we'll spend the second half of the semester really talking about religiosity and true religiosity and revelation, which is the authentic experience of the transcendent reality. So if all these are poor reasons to believe in God, what's a good reason? Well, is there a good reason to believe in the transcendent God? Well, I would say that your personal experience would be a good reason. Now, some people have extreme experience of the transcendent, just these mind-boggling experiences where they experience, things that are beyond our everyday human consciousness and perception, and it just, is just a mind-blowing, obvious thing. It knocks them off their feet, so to say, right? That is not that common, and those are often dismissed as imaginary or not real somehow, because not everybody has them. So it's kind of hard to say, okay, that's real if it doesn't happen to that many people that often. It's easier to say, well, that person has something going on with them. They're seeing things or something. They're imagining it, or they're having they're hallucinating or something like that. However, on the other hand, there are also these common experiences of the transcendent that are not extreme. They're very subtle, and they're very common. Most, if not all, people have them, right? But they're often not recognized as experiences of the transcendent because they're so common and so subtle that we think we don't really follow through with what having them means. Now, any of these experiences are subjective, right? The experience of the transcendent is something that we feel on the inside. We can't see it on the outside, right? So they can't be proven. However, they can be used as evidence, right, for our belief, right? Our belief in the possibility of the existence of the transcendent, or our faith in the existence of the transcendent, right? A belief that we cannot definitively prove. So when we talk about the subtle and common experiences of the transcendent, um, we can talk about things that are experience of reality that is beyond the perception of the five senses, right? Realities that are felt or known, but can't be seen or heard. We can also talk about these transcendents being these experiences being transcendent in the sense that they take us beyond a concept of ourselves as a separate individual, right? They take us beyond just like feeling or knowing that I am this separate thing, separate from other things, right? Feeling myself as separate from the rest of the world, as an individual and distinct, but not just distinct, but also separate being, right? Like I'm me, you are you. There's these two of us, right? Um, I am my body, and the desk is the desk. They're not the same thing. They're separate. They're different, right? And at times, these different parts, right, we might find ourselves as a separate individual being in conflict with other separate individual beings. But there are transcendent experiences we have in life that take us beyond that and allow us to feel some kind of invisible connection that make us feel like, no, I'm not just this separate individual. I am part of something greater, right? Sometimes we'll have experience of union with other things, right? Again, it's not something you can point and look at and say, see, look, I'm me and nature are one, or me and you, we're the same. You can't point out with the senses, but it's an invisible connection, right? That people can experience and feel. And some ways that this happens, right, are things like love, or a feeling of connection or unity with others, or nature, the experience of meaning. You realize when you say something has a meaning, like when you feel something has meaning in your life, you're saying that it's somehow connected to something greater. It's not just that a an organism gave birth to another organism, and then you picked up that organism, right? No, it's when people have a child, a lot of times they feel a meaning in life. They feel a connection to something greater. They feel like their life has a purpose. So that feeling of meaning, right? Maybe you meet someone, or you and you feel like there was a significance to this meeting. Like this really means something for you in your life, right? What are you saying? You're experiencing a connection that takes these separate individual occurrences and says, no, there's some invisible link between them. They're part of something greater, some greater purpose or something. Now you can't prove it, you can't see it, right? You can't taste it, right? But that experience of meaning takes us beyond the idea of events as simple, random, individual series of events, and helps us see that there's some invisible connection between them, right? The experiences of goodness, truth, or beauty often will take people beyond the individual experience and say, no, there's something, there is this is not just its own thing, it's part of something that goes beyond it too, right? Um, Sometimes people have timeless experiences of eternity. Again, this is transcendent because it goes beyond, right, the limited experience of time that we usually have, as time is a sequential thing. Here you're feeling time extending in all directions, not in transcending that sequential, partial experience of time. And then sometimes we have this feeling of the source of being, like everything is coming from something, which again shows that individual beings are connected, right, through to some invisible source. Right? So these are all common experiences, but again, sometimes they're so subtle. Like a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, I experience love," but they don't think what that means, right? That you're feeling a connection to something beyond your concept of a limited individual self. that invisible connection that takes you beyond what you can perceive with the five senses, right? So these are all transcendent experiences. Now, when we talk about these being subtle and common, I mean, even the feeling that there is something beyond what we can sense with the five senses could be considered a personal transcendent experience, right? So if you go to, if you're at a retreat, or even if you just happen to hear, right, uh, someone telling a story or reciting a parable, or let's say reading something from a holy book or a sacred text, and you just feel like something about what they're saying is true, right? This often happens to people with great works of poetry, right? They'll just feel like, yeah, there's something about what they're saying that's true, right? So even that feeling of there being something beyond what we can sense, even that feeling of connection, that itself, right, is a kind of internal sense. It's a kind of subtle experience of the transcendent.